time of the year. It's holiday season. It's Christmas. And it's time to also now it's a tradition from 5 years ago to read a Harry Palmer mystery, and we're talking with the other of the five of them. At least is what we know. We don't know if you're the front man, Dennis Broe. Dennis, how are you?
I'm okay. Thanks, Antonio. Very good to see you again. And
Are you really the person who writes all the Harry Palmers and now also Crystal Mysteries, or you are only the front man? You are the man who takes the money, and there's other people writing.
well, I, I don't think I would survive if I was just a man taking the money. So I have to be the author also.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
Uh, in terms of Christmas, I did send a message out. This is a time for a little bit of a dour cheer, I guess you could
Oh yeah,
say.
yeah,
A
yeah.
dour have a dour and sordid Christmas with Harry Palmer. That's really what this is about.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, Dennis, and now you're presenting your latest Harry Palmer's mystery, The Dark Ages, and you talked about it previously because you have, I think, you had the full outcome of Harry Palmer on your head. You talked previously last year, but. Can you summarize a little bit of the book, because I've read it? I've known there are, it's of course, during the blacklist period, there's also this background of the problems with housing. But I would like you to introduce us, and why did you decide now to go to the Dark Ages? And that, as you said on your last email, your last article on your Substack that I received just a few hours ago, we are also in Dark Ages, aren't we?
Yeah, well, okay, so this is a lesser known part of HUAC, what happened in
Uh huh.
1951. Everyone knows what happened in 1947. That's when the Hollywood 10 were called to Washington and
Yeah.
were, kind of uh, pounced on, humiliated by the committee, and eventually they go to jail in 1950, right? But
Mhm.
what's not so well known is that Hollywood, or that HUAC, the House Un-American Activities
Yeah.
Committee, essentially McCarthyism, came to Hollywood in 1951, where they did much more damage to far more people. I mean, they
Mhm.
really tried to clean out the left and progressives in Hollywood. You know,
Mm,
that's this period. This is the beginning in 51, and Harry gets involved in it. He doesn't mean to get involved with HUAC, but
yeah.
he's hired by a screenwriter. Now, these screenwriters, all of a sudden, they've lost their jobs, but they still need to make a living. So they're using fronts. Woody Allen has that film called The Front,
Hmm.
and so they're employing these other usually kind of studio hacks or low level
Yeah.
studio people or whatever, who are taking their scripts in and presenting themselves as the writers. And what happens is this screenwriter comes to Harry and says, look, my front is cheating me. I mean, it
Yeah.
used to
Yeah.
be
It's incredible.
first we were 50-50, then we were 10-90. I was taking 10%, he was taking 90, and now he won't even pay me at all. And
Yeah.
he says that there's a great line about, this really happened. He says, look, all you have to do is sit at home and write. I have to do the hard work of talking to the studios. So
Yeah. That's incredible. That's
it
incredible.
was
And
kind of
also, I
completely
remember
reversed.
a meeting of front people who they are like thinking, "Oh, we're going to get rich now," and it's it's curious how this system put the not talented people gaining money while the talented people were out of the system.
That's right. They were out of the system, but they still had to submit scripts, and they
Yeah.
were still being used and exploited. So they were still
Yeah.
writing. They were just writing for much less money than they wrote before.
Hmm.
So, yeah, um, yeah. So one of the Harry goes to this. He trails him to this
Yeah,
this diner, and one of them says, I'm gonna buy a new pool with with what my writer's writing.
I
So they're
remember.
all anticipating, what they can get from this, and they're all benefiting from it quite a lot, as is the studio system,
Hmm.
because all of a sudden now these people who they're paying top wages for, because of the Writers Guild, they're getting their stuff for nothing, and they
Hmm.
know that it's coming in through fronts. They know these people are
Yeah,
not writing this material; they couldn't possibly be writing it, but they're all going along with it because for the studio, why not? Why not pay 10% of what you would, or whatever, or pay less?
yeah, absolutely, and that's something you show very well in your book. Also, there's a line on all your different books, or at least the Harry Palmer series, but also all the work you've done as well as an author and also as a researcher. That's how the money it's behind everything. Because at the end is the bankers, is the producers, the people who want to have the money, who are leading all these kind of we could say uh, mistreatments of people, isn't it? It's like at the end, money order, money kills, we could say.
Yeah, that's true. Not to give it away, but Harry doesn't know what's happening is these screenwriters who have hired him are
Yeah,
dying. They're getting
yeah,
they're getting murdered.
yeah,
And
yeah. There's a very good line, because there's also your your style has lots of touches of humor, and this humor Harry Palmer does that. They ask him if he's a writer, and he says no. But writers used to die when I get along with them.
right, he says, "Are you a writer?" No, but I get writers killed.
I
Yeah.
get writer's kill. That's it.
Uh, yes, and yeah, so this is going on. It is a kind of you know, it's a collusion. It's a
Hmm.
collusion between the studios,
Yeah.
a sweetheart labor union, and the banks, to
Hmm.
enforce this thing, and also, of course, the HUAC, the
Yeah.
Senate,
Yeah.
or the House Activities Committee, Un-American Activities Committee, which is
Hmm.
also, sort of setting the terms for this, and yeah, so Harry sort of goes to bat for these people. Oh, and at one point, when they're getting killed, and Harry says, I can't figure out why would anyone want to be killing an unemployed writer who has no platform and makes no money. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's one of the key things. Like, what on earth are they gaining from this? But there is something to be gained, which we find out later. And there's
Mhm.
a what Hitchcock called a MacGuffin, but it has a little more of a place here because there is something that starts to show up and some reason why it's necessary to eliminate these people.
Mhm.
Um, Meanwhile, Crystal, Harry's partner now
Yes.
is in the agency. She has a lover, which is the woman from the last book, and they go to a lesbian club, and
Yeah.
uh, you kind of Crystal's a little timid about that, but then she
Mhm.
gets a case herself, which is a Mexican worker in Torrance, this all white boom
Mhm.
town of the 50s, and which the house that Buff built sort of featured Torrance.
Yeah.
Um, but they're trying to get this Mexican worker out because they want to build around him, and his
Mhm.
shack is sort of preventing them from building what they want to build,
Mhm.
but he has a lease, so they can't get him out. And then, so what happens is, uh, Crystal, they steal the lease, and I'm not going to say too much more about it, but Crystal has to do
No.
everything to get it back, and or find out whether it even exists anymore, and so
Mhm.
that's a story that sort of that propels her in the beginning, in the first half of the book.
Mhm. But
Um,
that was shocking for me, Dennis, because I was wondering. Okay, so only because of a paper, they could say this person doesn't own that house, but Maybe today, I think we are more protected, but I don't know if we are more protected than those times, because it was only the list, the proof that this Mexican Manuel, I think it was his name, isn't it, had to prove that was the place where he could live.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was the crucial thing because the whole town is sort of aligned against this guy, and they can use the principle of eminent
Mhm.
domain to get him out if he doesn't have the lease. They
Yeah.
can say, "Look, you don't really have a claim to this. There's
Mhm.
nothing you can present in court." And there's a court scene, where
Yeah,
they ask for the
I
lease.
remember. Wow, that the car scene, that's very important. That's shocking. Yeah.
Yeah, and yes, but so then the city, which is trying to take it, can claim eminent domain, and then they'll just turn the house over to the developer.
Hmm.
So that's how that would work in that case, you know. So
Hmm.
that's kind of the jeopardy that Crystal finds herself in. Harry, meanwhile, also with this with one of the writers, goes to
Hmm.
the house sun activity. You know,
Yeah.
he writer is called to testify, and Harry
Mhm.
goes with him to testify.
Yeah.
And the guy says he wants an investigator, and Harry said, "Well, okay, I guess he means me. I don't know," but he goes. And and the committee had their own members. There was a guy who Richard
Hmm.
Stripling, I think, who was a big with Richard Nixon actually,
Yeah.
and they had their own investigators. So the writer asked Harry to be his investigator. He doesn't do much in the thing, but he kind of watches the guy because the guy doesn't know whether he's really going to testify or not. At first, he thinks, "Of course, I will not testify," but then they
Yeah.
really, that's this is as he says, the this studio producer pulls him over and starts
Mm.
whispering in his ear, just like the devil, and says, "All you have to do is just say yes, name a few names, and the studio wants you back. You're back to work. Just go ahead." And Harry says, as he leaves, he could see the tail sticking out, the red tail, the red fiery tail of the
I,
of the devil, whispering in his
I
ear.
I remember that's a part I like very much of your book, because it deals also with ethics, and that's
Yep.
something that Harry Palmer has, and I think that you have, because okay, not everything is money. As we can see in some relationships, there are some treasons during the book that have to deal with money, but also with ethics. And that testimony of this writer, that's that's a very like high point of the book. Also, there's also some things I like. It's that sometimes at the end of each chapter, there's not at the end of the all, but some at the end, there's a reflection of your characters, and there are very interesting ones. We could talk about it, but I wrote one, and I love this one. A patriot. This is Harry Palmer speaking. A patriot,
Mhm.
I decided, was not someone who blindly went along with what the country said, but someone like Ortel, the writer, who was clear-headed enough to oppose it when it was wrong.
Yes.
This is something you subscribe also as Dennis Broe, not only Harry Palmer.
Well, it's important to oppose the country when it's wrong.
Absolutely.
And we could start talking about how wrong it is at the moment, but maybe we'll hold that for just a little bit. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that does happen. And that's the suspense in this scene because we don't know which way Ortel is going to go, and they're really
Yep.
trying to pressure him. And and look, it's the jeopardy is great. If you do not name names, you are immediately blacklisted. Now he's already blacklisted. He's on the list. He hasn't been working. But once it becomes official in front of the committee, you will never work again.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so it's a great pressure. It's a great pressure on the ability of these writers to earn, and actors also.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and and you do have to have some, as you said, you have to have some ethics in order to oppose it. However, it should be said that there were about I think there were about 400 people called, something like that the committee called, and it's like sort of over a year in Hollywood.
Four
But
hundred. It's more than one person per day
yeah,
in one
that's
year.
right.
Yeah, it's,
Yes.
it's incredible. Yeah, yeah. Wow.
Yep. Yes,
They were
they
very
were.
productive on that
Yeah.
sense.
Now, these were not all communists. They were calling
Yeah,
everyone. They were calling everyone who had progressive leanings in Hollywood.
yeah.
But
In your book, it seems. Correct me if I'm wrong, but for what you say, for them it was more important that you joined or you belonged to the guild than you were communist. They didn't care if you were communist, but if you were working with the guild, oh no, no, we don't want the guild.
well, that's what's behind this whole thing in a way,
Yeah,
and that's what the book sort of talks about is there's really an attack on labor.
yeah.
And the communists, whatever you think of the communists as a party, they were great labor organizers, and that's one reason why they went after them, to
Mm,
weaken labor. But let me tell you, just to add one thing, with all this pressure, with all these
yeah.
names called, just about 2/3 of the people called refused to testify. So that's
Wow,
real bravery.
wow.
You know,
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah,
that's yeah, that's actually standing up for what you believe, and it requires real sacrifices, and these people made it. So, and there were other people too. There's a there's a thing where um, in the sort of the Lynn, who's the Chinese woman,
yeah,
goes to a pool party. Big in LA are pool parties,
yeah, yeah.
and, to the labor leader who's invited her is talking to a producer, and they're talking about a writer director who testified
Hmm.
and who then made 250, he then signed a contract for, I think it was $250,000 the next day. So it
Hmm.
could work both ways. you
Yeah,
were you could be you could be outlawed, or you could be rewarded if you
yeah,
went along with it.
yeah.
So,
It's incredible. It's shocking that, well, nowadays, according to at least some rhetorics, uh, it seems like everybody wants to go from southern of the US, mainly from Mexico or wherever, to the US. But on those times, and there's also a paragraph where, if I'm not wrong, it's Crystal thinking about it. I'm talking with some producers, with some writers on Mexico. They had to go to Mexico to work, and
yes.
it seems like in on this regard, okay, they are selling that, okay, the US is the land of the free, but at least on this, Mexico was freer than the US.
Yes, actually, and also there's a Mexican actress who Harry gets involved with, who also comes to the US, and in the end she says, "I'm going back to the Mexican cinema. It's too rugged here. It's too impersonal, and it's too wicked. I can't take it anymore." And that's based on an actual Mexican actress, to tell you the truth.
I know, I know, I know. And the moment I saw the nickname, we could say, I know, well, it's there are lots of real characters who are intertwined in the book, besides also the fictional characters of previous books. But I loved when Chester Himes is one of my favorite writers of noir
Mine too.
novel. And then when you said Chester Himes, I said, wow, what happened? And then Buñuel appears. How do you do to, because, well, you have a lot of background, you know a lot about the times, but how do you select these guest appearances, we could say?
Well, I'd had an encounter with Chester Himes because I was teaching a course here in minority literature in
No.
Paris 10 in Nanterre, and we
Wow.
did If He Hollers, Let Him Go. So we did a kind of intense reading of that book. So I
Wow.
I had and I do love Chester Himes also,
Oh,
uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so and his story is that he goes to France and finally, makes some money. He couldn't make any
Mhm.
money in the US. His first
Yeah.
book was well received, If He Hollers, but then he wrote a book about lefties or the communists. They didn't like that
Mhm.
very much. Then he wrote a book about the white literary establishment, and after that, that was it for Chester Himes. He couldn't sell anything, so he ended up going to France. Now the screenwriters, yeah, they have to go. They Many of them have to go somewhere else to work.
Yeah.
So a lot of them go to Mexico. And some of them, the wealthier ones, not wealthy, but the ones who have a little more money and are able to take a little more with them, settle
Hmm.
in Mexico City. The ones who are a little poorer go to Cuernavaca, which is just south of Mexico City.
Hmm.
So that's where Harry goes, and that's where he meets, because he thinks there's this writer who's still alive. That's where he goes to find him, actually. And yeah, so that's a thing. They went to Mexico. They went to England, and they worked on a show called Robin Hood, which was
Yeah.
pretty accurate, which was about robbing from the rich and giving to the poor, which is, kind of lefty thing. So they
Mhm.
fit in well in that show.
Sure.
Um, I remember I used to watch Robin. I used to watch that show when I was growing up. Actually, they came
Mhm.
out on Saturday afternoon in black and white, and I love the show. Or
But
some of them went.
to go there,
What?
they needed a passport. That's why one of your
Yes,
characters can't go there, because if you don't have the passport, you
that's
could
right.
go to Mexico without a passport, but you couldn't go to Britain without it.
That's right. Yeah. So they were. Yeah. So they didn't realize that at first, but then they started seizing passports.
Yeah,
So that
yeah,
to
yeah.
keep
That's
them there.
incorrect. Yeah, yeah.
And some of them went to the New York stage also. The New York stage was a little more liberal and a little more, inviting, and a little
Yeah.
less, you know, um, uh, I don't know, intense, in terms of the repression. So yes,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes, and there are a lot of guests who come in. There's Chester Himes. Harry goes to watch to the movies. He likes to go to the
Yes.
movies,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
I have to say that's a little bit borrowed from the series Sugar, actually, because Sugar
Sure.
watches a lot of old movies. And I thought,
Hmm.
well, Harry's has mentioned movies a little bit before, but he's living in the classic time of film noir in 1951. So why wouldn't he be watching those movies? Why
Yeah.
wouldn't he like? And he does like them. And that's where he meets Chester Himes. And Chester Himes is there's a
Oh yeah.
moment in Sarah, this film that he's watching, where the black character, the French Senegalese soldier, ends up
Mhm.
strangling a German, or in other words, a black man strangling a white man, and had, and that's a real no on the Hollywood screen, probably even today.
Mhm.
And in the book, Chester Himes is sitting in the theater and starts clapping. So Harry comes
Yeah.
up and starts talking to him, and they have a coffee. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And
I love that. I love
Buñuel
that
is there
scene.
too.
And when you discover it's Chester Himes, I say, "Wow, it's surprising." Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Buñuel is there too. Buñuel, of course, was kicked out of Hollywood. When he first
Yeah.
came to Hollywood, they gave him the assignment of Greta Garbo. And I mean, that's the MGM untouchable star. And Buñuel started to do his surrealist thing with her, and that was it. He was off.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when Buñuel was in, uh, Buñuel for a while was working with the at MoMA, Museum of
Yeah.
Modern Art. It's in the basement,
Mm-hmm.
and Cardinal Spellman met with the head of MoMA, and he said, I hope you know you have the Antichrist in your basement." That was it for Buñuel. So Buñuel had to go to Mexico. Luckily for us, because some of his Mexican films are great. But
Mhm.
two of them were written by these blacklistees. So Buñuel makes an appearance, and the thing they always said about Buñuel was he made the best paella. So
Oh, yeah,
they're
so
gonna go.
yeah, you
They're
include
gonna
that.
go have some paella. There's another one too, which I really like, which is Marilyn Monroe.
Oh
Um,
yes, yes,
the
yeah,
true story.
absolutely.
Actually, she did come and warn a director who she'd worked with that
Uh
there
huh.
was a sheriff's car parked below his house, and he better be careful when he came out, because they were waiting there to serve him a subpoena. So I thought that was a great story, actually.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. That's also a very interesting one. And also one thing that shocked me, and I didn't know, is that during that time, Democrats were in government. That's something you mentioned,
Yes.
and this
Yep.
is something because we always think that the blacklist was something related with Republicans, but it was Democrats who were governing then. So I
Yes.
wonder how that connects with also our times currently nowadays. How can you talk about it?
Okay, but yes, they
If
were.
you want to.
Yes. In fact, I'll just say this one thing too, which I was shocked at, that there were concentration camps. There was a bill to, to ready concentration camps for these people, and there was a
Wow.
plan, to enact this. And one of the sponsors of the bill was Hubert Humphrey, a Democrat.
Wow.
And and this was, yeah, this was a Democratic administration. It's a Democrat who's the head of HUAC when they come, John Wood from Georgia, who
Mhm.
when they come to Hollywood. So yes, so the Democrats were not immune from this. They were part of it also, and they went along with it just as everyone did, just as the Republicans did. There's a kind of like I don't know. I guess we call it sometimes the uniparty because we have that now.
Mhm.
We have this, unfortunately,
Yes.
a sort of melding of the Democrats and the Republicans around some things, and one of the things they meld around is the deep state and the war machine. You know,
Mhm.
they're all for three starting three world wars. They're very, very dangerous. The whole group of them.
Yeah.
The Senate and the House is a very dangerous institution. By the way, it's one that most Americans don't have any faith in.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's like, I think the only institution they that so I think they have the least faith in the Congress, and then
Mhm.
next to that is the media.
Oh.
Which is, and of course those two work seamlessly because the media is always sort of on the side of the Congress promoting them and all this kind of stuff. But yes, it's a very dangerous situation now. And I did talk a bit about how I did write a piece about, and I mentioned it a little bit in the afterword about how there is a resonance with today, and
Yes.
it's not so much the resonance is, for some people they think it's, well, Trump, Trump is coming in and Trump is a horror and Trump is going to do this and he's going to stamp out rights. Well, that's partly true. He is and probably will, but there's a much larger consensus about stamping out rights and about stamping out dissent, especially
Mhm.
around Gaza and around the Israeli genocide,
Mhm.
and that's very, very difficult to it's just been more and more intense, especially on college campuses where you had most of the dissent, where it was sort of originating from in the spring, and they've really clamped down in the fall. So it's kind of scary to watch it. I just wrote an article about it and released it about, as David Lynch says in Twin Peaks, it's happening again. And of course, that repression is happening, but it's happening this time in
Mhm.
a different context. The context of a very dissatisfied working class, which at the moment is only the dissatisfaction has only been expressed or allowed to be expressed in terms of voting for Trump. But let me tell you, Trump is going to betray them fairly soon. Probably, I'm looking at my watch, probably in about 3 or 4 minutes. And when
Yeah.
that happens, this working class, which had swung to Trump, is going to be just as disaffected, and they're going to demand more. The number of people who were supporters of Barry Sanders of Senator Sanders in 2016 and then went over to Trump is just amazing, actually,
Yeah.
So
I read
once,
that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so if they see that Trump is betraying them, as he inevitably will, because Trump is basically about Trump,
Yes.
then you will have a real battle for the hearts and minds of Americans. And I'll say this one, then we'll go back to talking about 1951. But the New York Times ran an article about the Democratic Party betraying the working class. Okay, and
Yes.
what
I read
happened and
it.
how it
Yeah.
happened, but they refused. What they couldn't say is that one of the ways they're betraying them, and this is happening right now. Right now, before Biden leaves, they're doing all of these giveaways. Billions of dollars are going to Israel and Ukraine.
Yeah.
One of the ways they're betraying the American working class is by supporting these foreign wars, which no
Mhm.
one cares about,
Yeah.
except the uniparty. So anyway, but just to go back to talking about this period again, I wanted to say that one of the things that's kind of interesting about it And one of the things I love doing in these books is assembling stories. And
Mm-hmm.
there's so many interesting stories from this period, and in a way, my job is simply to kind of tell them and to provide a kind of forum where I can do them. It's kind
Yeah.
of like, because I've been reading Gogol, and it's sort of like Gogol talking uh, about these folk tales from the Ukraine. Well,
Mm-hmm.
these are folk tales from a different village, from the Hollywood village. Um,
Yeah.
some of these stories you just can't believe. There's a lawyer who hired a blacklisted screenwriter to do research, asked him to write up his summary to the jury, telling a story because he's a screenwriter.
Mm-hmm.
And what the guy wrote helped save a black man from being convicted of a rape. This is
Yeah.
amazing story for a detective. And Harry gets involved in this, and Harry helps him himself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then there was all the double dealing, and one of the Act Two is called "The Time of the Toad," which is Dalton Trumbo's word for what was going on. They were all toadies, all going along with this. One screenwriter who turned in others because he said it was the moral thing to do. And then it turns out he welched on payments to his wife and on personal debts. When people would come to collect personal debts, he would tell them that the statute of limitations had run out on the debt. So wait a minute, what? Okay, another very poor screenwriter poor, I mean, a very bad screenwriter who turned in his fellows so he could advance. It
Yeah.
was, as I said, a time of betrayal. There's also in the book a trafficking story, a la Jeffrey Epstein. And that's a very interesting part of this as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's fascinating stories to tell, or that are sort of abound in the book. So
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, and it's incredible how they correlate also with our current times. And so, well,
they
I
do.
guess that you are prepared now. You're ready to write the sixth Harry Palmer, and it would be the third now Crystal book.
Yes,
Or
this is
can you tell us something about it? Because last year we talked about this one, so
yes.
we are ready for the next one.
Okay, so the next one, this is the third book in the second trilogy. The second
Yeah.
trilogy is called The Dark Ages. So the
Hmm.
first one was called The House That Buff Built, about real estate. Second
Yeah.
one was called The Dark Ages, about Hollywood.
Hmm.
And the third one is called Pornocopia, and it's about the porn industry. And
Hmm.
the porn industry in 1951 was in the province of the mob. And the Chicago mob was what was prominent in Hollywood. And Harry does get involved with the mob, toward the end of the
Oh.
book. And
Hmm.
in fact, he owes them. At the end of the book, he's told that he owes them a debt. And
Hmm.
so that's going to come due in the next book. And but he's investigating. He's looking at the industry. First of all, he he goes to an AA meeting because he's decided that he drinks too much, and
Oh.
he
Yes,
sleeps around.
you talk something about it during this book. He reflects about
Yes,
how he drinks. Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah,
Thinking of
yeah. He says at AA they don't drink for the rest of their lives. I was wondering if maybe I could not drink for the rest of the afternoon. That's where he is.
yes, yes, I remember that quote.
So anyway, he goes to an AA meeting and he meets a woman who's in the porn industry, and of course they hit it off, and that's where this story starts. But this is a moment. It's a very interesting moment in the industry because the industry is this horrible, reputation,
Yeah,
deserved, of
yeah.
exploiting people and whatever in the worst way possible. But the money people are looking at it and they're saying, wait a minute, there's a lot of money out here and we're not taking advantage of it. And
Mm,
it's the moment where they're about to say, wait a minute, maybe there's something for us here. And that's what
sure.
happens in this book. So yes, yeah,
As the Act 4 of the Dark Ages says, money makes the world go round. As we
yes,
can see
exactly.
on screen right now. Okay,
Yeah.
Dennis. So I don't know if there's something else you want to talk about Dark Ages, or if there is something I haven't asked you. You wanted to to talk about now before we finish?
Well, just to say there are a lot of twists and turns, I think, in the book. I hope,
Yes.
you know, I hope it can be read as a detective thriller as well as a kind of political commentary, you know. And so yes, in this one, it ends a little differently. Usually, it has the more, I would say, sort of not Sherlock Holmes, but you know,
Yeah.
it has the denouement where we finally find out who did it. You know,
Mhm.
unfortunately, everyone did it in this one in a way, kind of, you
Yeah.
know, so it stretches out a bit, you know. So that's
That,
kind of an interesting thing, I think, in the book. And yeah, I think there's enough, you know, kind of thrills and chills. And Crystal features quite heavily, quite prominently in the book. In the second part, she has to do intelligence gathering really with the head of the studio, you know, and she's very
mm.
funny in terms of what she thinks about everything. She's also very funny in terms of what she thinks about Harry, actually. She doesn't really.
That's what I was going to tell you. How she thinks, oh, I'm doing it great. I am a very good detective. How she also realizes that she's doing a good work, and also I love the way you, as you said previously. Previous characters of the previous novels appear, but you do it in a way that if somebody buys a book and well, they didn't know about Harry Palmer, they can follow perfectly the plot, and maybe they think, oh, I should buy the previous one, because also in terms of not only political reflections on all the knowledge you have of those times, and you show to the people, but also in terms of plot, well, all your books are very funny, are very, you can follow along because lots of things happen, and something I like is that you don't portray Harry or Crystal or any one of them as the perfect detectives. Oh, I know how to do this. No, no, they fail, and and sometimes me as a reader, I think, okay, Dennis did it again, because I didn't think he was going to fail here or she was going to fail here, and they fail, and now they have to overcome that failure. But that gives to the plot. It's more naturalistic, and you're more involved because you say, "Oh no, I thought you were going to solve this way, and now how are you gonna do it?" That's always very interesting.
Yeah, I'll wrap up with this. You know, part of what gets them back on track, because they often do experience failure, is they go to see their therapist, Dr. Kelman,
Oh
who
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah,
owned
yeah.
by Freud in Vienna, actually.
Mhm.
And Dr. Kelman often gets them back on track, and there's an obstacle to overcome this time between Harry and Crystal, actually.
Quite an obstacle. Quite an obstacle. We won't say anymore.
He, he sets them up. Um, and actually, I will say this because I was just in Vienna, and I went to the Freud Museum, and I told them about Dr. Kelman, and they're ordering the book to see if it's appropriate to be put in the Freud Museum. So, because
Oh,
Dr. Kelman is a Freudian who, you know, and she's in every book,
yeah.
and you know, she also is an abstract expressionist painter. Actually, you know, Harry
Oh,
doesn't know what
yeah.
that is. He just knows it's sort of grotesque, kind of, you know, and he just sort of says that's the way I was feeling right now, you know. But
Mhm.
yeah, so yeah, so we'll see. And I also realized that there's a next trilogy after this one.
Oh, you
And
have also the following trilogy. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I know a little bit about it from my time in Vienna, and that's that a Jewish woman comes to Harry and says, I want you to get this painting back. It was stolen by the Nazis, and I
Mm.
want you to find it. It really means a lot to my family and me, and I want you to go after it. And one of the things that happens is he and Crystal have to go to Vienna.
Oh,
And what I discovered
now
in
they're
Vienna.
going out of LA. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Well, in the middle, you
Wow.
know, they'll probably visit Vienna. You know, they
Yeah.
usually go someplace. In the porn book, they're going to go to Vegas, of course, you know, because that's
Yes,
where the
yes,
mob
yes.
is.
Yeah. In this
But
book, he's gone to Mexico,
or
so
Nevada,
they're traveling
Mexico.
more. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And in the art book, they're going to go. They will go to Vienna, actually. And what I discovered was that there's a very active black market in paintings in Vienna, which is both
wow.
stolen paintings and paintings that were stolen by the Nazis, never returned.
Wow,
You
wow,
know, so
that's interesting also.
yeah,
Okay, okay, so we'll have a lot of Harry Palmer to come. We'll have to let you write, Dennis. We'll have to let you write. Thank
okay,
you, thank you very
okay.
much.
Thanks so much, Antonio.
Dennis Broe from Paris. You're closer to Vienna than me, but I'm closer to Chicago, so I can go follow the traces of Harry Palmer. Dennis Broe, who's the author of Dark Ages. You also have a Substack, dennisbro.substack.com, where we can follow you. We can subscribe to your articles, and well, we can also follow you through the different social media where you publish your articles, your reflections, and also where we can know when you publish another book. By the way, congrats, not only for the quality of your writing, because but also for the presentation. I love the editing, the publishing style of the 5 books. It's very coherent and very easy to read. And well, congrats on everything on that.
Thank you. I have to say this: the same designer worked on all of them, so there's a real congruity, and
Yeah,
continuity that she provides, which is really excellent, actually. Yeah.
great designer, great designer.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. See you